it, because they do that all the time and they enjoy it, and doesn't return it, we now can sue federally. Before that, there was a case that was decided in the Eastern District that pretty much had precluded that ability to sue under what's called a 1983 action, a civil rights deprivation action. Now we have the ability to sue again. And the Commonwealth Court specifically came out and overruled, to the extent they could, they said that the federal court was wrong in finding that a person doesn't have that liberty and property interest in a licensed issue to carry. So now we have more ammunition to go after the city of Philadelphia. In the city of Philadelphia, I could spend my entire practice just suing the city of Philadelphia. Good God. I don't know how many of you know, but in August, the city had this great idea. They want transparency. They decided they were going to have a website and post anyone who at least was denied for a license to carry firearms and appealed. Now, the breadth of it, we currently don't know. We're litigating the issue. Could have been individuals who were granted licenses. It could have been. Could have been people who were just denied and never appealed. We have all the different bases covered in our suit. But the city solicitor doesn't even know whose all information was disclosed. There is a specific provision in Pennsylvania law saying that all that applicant information is confidential. They didn't care. Full disclosure. We want transparency. We want everyone to see, yet Police Chief Ramsey isn't even MOPEC certified, can't wear a uniform, can't wear a gun because he's not a law enforcement officer, and the district attorney's office will not investigate him. How do I know? Because I filed a complaint against him. I asked Seth Williams, after I asked the Attorney General to investigate. The Attorney General first said, yeah, there might be some issues here, but you know what? You got to bring it with the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office. And I had already put in my original letter to the AG, look, there's a little bit of a conflict here. But they said, no, you got to ask the DA. So I sent a letter to the DA. I said, listen, you got an issue here. He's come out in reports and acknowledged the fact that he is not MOPEC certified. Oh, yeah, and by the way, by not being MOPEC certified, he hasn't been entitled to a salary the entire time he's been there. So all the people of Philadelphia have right to recoupment of all the years that he's been in office of his salary. Guess what? I got no response. Big surprise, right? Well, I wasn't done with it. So I sent another letter. I said, hey, here's the certified receipt of you people signing for it. I've already filed this with you. Please let me know where we stand. They send me back a letter. We see that you're not a resident of Philadelphia, and we don't find that you have the ability to bring any type of action against the sheriff, or excuse me, the Police Chief Ramsey, and we're not willing to do such. Okay. Fine, fair enough. So I now contact the Attorney General again, including a copy of the District Attorney's letter, and say, hey, look, I did what you wanted. There's clearly a conflict, and contrary to your assertion to me that you don't have power, the Attorney General Act specifically does give you the power to get involved where there's a conflict situation and some other issues that would apply in this situation. Crickets. Haven't heard back. Is that a big surprise? No. Our own government won't investigate itself when it's violating the law. You have an individual who cannot open carry in the city of Philadelphia who is on the news almost nightly giving interviews where he's open carrying. He doesn't have a license to carry because he's a police officer. Oh yeah, and by the way, that's another neat little thing about Philadelphia. If you want to become a police officer in Philadelphia and you have a license to carry, bye-bye. You have to turn in your license to carry firearms. Wow. Now, my new case, because of the Commonwealth Court's decision, that's a taking by the government. So we'll see where that gets us when I have a couple law enforcement officers from Philadelphia. There are good Philadelphia PD guys. I know everyone always slams the Philadelphia PD. There are good officers everywhere. It's no different for any other profession. There are good and bad. There are good and bad lawyers. There are good and bad doctors. There are good and bad police officers. And we've got to remember how more draconian Philadelphia's laws are with regards to becoming a police officer there, you actually, as a law enforcement officer there, must give them a listing of every firearm you own personally.
Wow.
So I have Philadelphia police officers where we set up gun trusts and other vehicles and entities to store the firearms and hold the firearms because they don't own them. The trust does. These are the types of situations we have to deal with. This is just Philadelphia. Recently, I had a case up in Lackawanna County. Return of firearms. The sheriff would not return the firearms to my client. It was a PFA situation where, I don't know how many of you realize, but protection from abuse orders anymore are given out like candy. The pendulum has swung the opposite if her life depended on it. Now, they're used for vindictive purposes and retaliatory purposes, and the judges just issue them. They won't even consider any argument to the contrary. So my client had a PFA that had long expired. He had tried to get his firearms back on his own and had failed. The court system didn't want to take him seriously. So he hired me. I filed the petition. I asked for attorney's fees. Everything else. We go in front of the judge. The president judge of Lackawanna County grants my request. Signs the order that day. Take the order down to the prothonotary, file it of record, take a copy, go up to the sheriff's department. Speak with the first sheriff deputy who comes to me. I say, I have this order. She reads it a second time, third time. Oh, I can't accept this. I said, it's an order signed by the president judge. What do you mean? Oh, this isn't our form order. I said, excuse me? Oh, it's not our form order. I said, it's an order signed by the president judge. Yeah, but it's not our form order. I said, I know. I said, we've been over this already. It's an order signed by the president judge, which you have to comply with. Oh, I'm going to have to go get my superior. So her supervisor, Deputy Acolta, I believe his name was, comes out and says, why are you hassling my deputy? Woo! I can see this is going just up my alley. These are what I like. So I said, excuse me? I said, I have a court order directing you to turn over the firearms. And he looks at it, he says, this isn't our form order. I said, I know. We've been over this. I said, I'm sure whatever your form order is, it's very nice. I'm sure it's the best thing since sliced bread, but it won't work in this situation. And he says, well, that's too bad for you because I don't accept any order I don't want to. No. You don't accept an order from the president judge? Nope. I said, should I file a contempt petition? He actually laughs at me and says, you can go and do whatever you want. I don't care. I'm not going to enforce any order I don't want to. Sheriff's deputy, sheriff's department's responsible for enforcing the orders of the judiciary. Okay. So, talk with my client. I said, listen, there's a bunch of ways we can go at this. I know you want your guns back. My idea is I go get their form order. We take it up to the judge, and I get him to sign the form order, in addition to the order he's already signed. Client says, yeah. Okay. Go up, get the judge's law clerk. They're still there. Law clerk's jaw drops when I tell him, sheriff's department's refusing to honor the order. He doesn't know how to respond to me. He says, I know that they have their form order, but it's an order. I said, yeah, I know. I was through this with 2 deputies down there. He says, okay. He says, listen, it's going to be no problem. I'll get the judge to sign their form order. Okay. So we get the form order, signed by the judge, go down the prothonotary file, go back up and serve a copy on the sheriff's department. Okay, great. Well, there's one problem with the form order. The form order is a blanket order, one sentence that says all the firearms are to be returned. Guess what? My client doesn't own all the firearms. My order dealt with that fact. Their order does not. Technically an unlawful order. The judge had no power to grant return of certain firearms that weren't even my client's. But the sheriff's office wants that order. So, file the order, and I say, okay, when can we, where should we back the truck up to get the guns and ammo? Oh, no, you can't do that. What do you mean I can't do that? I've given you 2 orders now from the judge. Oh, no, the deputy that handles the PICS checks and PFA orders isn't in. I said, hold on. You're doing people's licenses to carry firearms right over there, and there's the guy right behind the computer there typing away, doing them as they sit here. You can do a PICS check. Oh, no, it's got to go through our PFA deputy. I'm like, okay. I can play this game. So when will your guy be in? Oh, it generally takes 2 weeks before you get back the firearms. 2 weeks, huh? Yeah, we'll call your client when we're ready. Okay. Thinking I got a court order, so we'll just start packing up the days. Because that's going to be part of my 1983 civil rights action for deprivation of property. They had no right to take. So 2 weeks go by. And I'm sure you can guess this one. My client doesn't hear.
Surprise, surprise.
So I call the sheriff's department. I get ignored. I call the judge. I said, listen, and this is one of the things of practice in law you learn. You want to bring the judge into issues like that. I could have just drafted up a contempt petition and filed it. Some judges, that will irritate. And especially when we're dealing with the sheriff's department. So I contact the judge's office. I talked to the same law clerk who couldn't believe that the sheriff's office would just, refuse to honor an order. And he can't believe me. He says, are you serious? And I said, yeah. I said, I don't know what to do. He says, all right. He says, let me try and take care of it. So he calls me back later the day and says, okay, there is a division chief here I want you to talk to in the sheriff's department. He'll get everything straightened out. Here's his number, call him. All right. So I call him, and I get voicemail. And guess what? I don't get a return call. My client calls him the next day. No return call. So I call the judge's office again, judge's chambers, and I said, I have never, in all my years of practice, seen anyone ignore a court order. Because otherwise, you're coming in cuffs, and do I need to go get the coroner to come arrest the sheriff to get this order complied with? Or how do you want me to handle this? Because for those who don't know, the only person who can actually serve the sheriff is the coroner. And technically, the coroner has arrest powers over the sheriff. So, it's an interesting issue.
Yeah.
So, the clerk actually says, I'm going to have to talk with Judge Munley about this because this is just out of control at this point. He says, I'll have Judge Munley call down to the sheriff's department. I said, okay. Finally, for about 4 weeks since the execution of the order, my client gets a call and says, okay, come in a week and we'll return your guns. Okay. So my guy goes. He does get his guns. Of course, there's now rust on some of them. Some of the stocks are dinged up. And so, for those who don't know, there is actually statutory protection where a sheriff takes in the weapons. He has a duty to ensure that they are returned in the same condition as they're taken in. So we have state law violations. We have federal deprivation of property complaint allegation possibilities. My client finally got his guns back. But with the damage to the firearms, the issue is now really burdens on us to show that this rust didn't exist. So why I'm telling you this long story is also to kind of explain to you, you never know when something may happen. Make sure you have an inventory of all your firearms. Not that you're posting it anywhere or anything like that, but pictures and everything so you have the condition of your guns in case anything like this would ever occur. Now that's just, another case example. And really, case examples do serve as the best way to go over these legal issues. Because people don't believe you when you say the issues that you confront. And a lot of people say, well, my attorney, charged me all this money. I got to admit, sometimes there's nothing you can do. I had done my job. I could not get the sheriff to comply with the law. I was going to the, end of the world for my client, and I will do that for any client. But there's limitations on what generally any attorney can do at some point. What do you do when the sheriff just refuses an order? Sure, I could have contacted...
One word, sir. Militia.
Well, you could
Seriously, folks.
Right.
Citizens arrest.
Right. And I'm not scared of those things. I mean, I battle these issues every day. I love nothing more than going toe-to-toe with ATF. I'm sure there's one sleeper in here somewhere. They always love to follow me around. It's one of those things, I guess, when you're good, they always want to watch you. I actually was at SHOT Show in January, and I was at the ATF Town Hall meeting, and the Assistant Chief Deputy comes up to me and says, "I want to talk with you." And I'm like, "Oh, this is going to be good." And he says, "No," he says, "I wanted to thank you." Now I'm thinking, this is really going to be good. I'm leaving here in cuffs. And to my surprise, he's like, "No." He says, "We watch your blog." And I'm like, "Oh, that's a big surprise." And he wanted to actually truly thank me because I had posted an article about the time it was taking for the National Firearms Act NFA branch examiners to approve ATF Form 1s and 4s, which are for either making or transfer of machine guns, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, destructive devices, silencers, all the fun toys, as I call them, because I actually had a form approved, and I'm probably the only crazy person who actually would look at the date it was approved and recognized it as being on a Sunday. So I actually put out a blog posting saying, cut these examiners some slack. These are not your typical government employees. These examiners actually are working pretty hard, and it is not uncommon for them to be working from their homes on weekends. And he came up to me to say that the atmosphere in the NFA branch was extremely depressed at that time that my blog article was posted, because all the examiners felt no matter what they could do, they were always, the bad guy. And this apparently raised spirits within the NFA branch, and he said he wanted to thank me. I know ATF has always been around. Even since I was in law school, I was working on a research paper, turned out I think about 120 pages, on the inaccuracies of the National Firearms Registration and Transfer Record. Went back since the implication, or since it was originally formed, and reviewed all the Office of Inspector General reports and everything else showing the inaccuracies. While I was writing that report, this is the stuff people think they only hear about in movies. I came home to my apartment, and it was probably one of the only times I caught myself in situation green. I wasn't paying attention to my surroundings. There was a black car parked there. I didn't pay attention, had tinted out windows, had no license plate. Individual in a suit comes up to me while my back is turned to him and says, "You need to drop the article." I said, "What?" He says, "If you know what's good for you, you will drop the article." And for those who know me, that just spurs me on. So I said, "Well, yeah, that ain't going to happen." Individual gets in his car and drives away, and that's the last time I ever hear of that. But the only people who knew about me working on the article were some of those in the industry and those other individuals who were on law review with me, who knew I was writing the article and were giving me feedback. So they do have their tentacles everywhere. And that's not just ATF, that's FBI, that's Department of Homeland Security now we have. And I don't know how many of you heard, but ATF is now changing its name. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives is not long enough and does not encompass everything they do anymore, apparently. They now want to be called the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives / Violent Crime Bureau.
How much money is that going to cost us to change everything?
I'm sure a lot of money. Violent Crime Bureau. Someone want to tell FBI they just lost the whole segment of their, enforcement purpose? But yeah, that's the thing. Things are changing at such a fast pace. No one can keep up with them. And that's really why organization like Mark's starting here is so important. It's important for the people to know about all the issues that are out there. We have something like 31, I believe, current pending bills in Pennsylvania that mention a firearm.
83
83?
from today's count.
Not all of them are anti. Not all of them are obviously pro. We have individuals like Darrell Metcalf with Bill 357 that is an avid Second Amendment supporter. But we also have bills, like I'm going to pass the floor over to Tom in a couple minutes to discuss, that want to do things extremely draconian. Things that make what Maryland just did a walk in the park. And it's out there. We have to be vigilant. We have to stay aware of these things. The only people we have to blame for these laws getting enacted are ourselves. Goes back to where I started with. You need to know the candidates. You need to know who's running for office. You need to get involved. I can only do so much. No matter what the situation is, I can only do so much. We heard the situation of the individual who, I would say under the First Amendment, makes a statement. But yet they're getting charged with terroristic threats. You have individuals, while I'm not condoning it, get a second DUI, highest rate, and they're forever prohibited under federal law from being able to possess a firearm. No one was injured, no property damage. I am just saying highest rate, blood alcohol content causes them to become prohibited on a second offense. We don't once hear the legislature saying we need to deny people the privilege of driving or the privilege of owning a vehicle